Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Don Arleth, and you're watching Midday Report here on TVP World, where we track the day's most important developing stories. Norway's Prime Minister has warned that the expiry of the landmark nuclear arms control treaty between the United States and Russia marks a dangerous turning point for global security. He urged all parties to return to the negotiations, stressing that while Europe fears Russia's tactical nuclear weapons, most intercontinental missiles remain aimed at the United States. This comes as Norway, Poland, and other countries bordering Russia are discussing how best to deter Russia if the war in Ukraine comes to an end. Adam Yasser reports from Tromsø.
Norway, Poland, and allies bordering Russia are discussing how to deter the country from new aggression if there's a ceasefire or peace in Ukraine. That's according to Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Støre here at the Arctic Conference in Tromsø, Norway. Norway shares a long border with Russia in the Arctic, facing off Moscow's massive nuclear arsenal and navy just a few hundred kilometers away. The Norwegian leader said he did not see an imminent threat of a conflict with Russia, but wasn't taking peace for granted.
As a government, when we consult our military and we consult our intelligence, that there is an imminent threat against Norway. Actually, for the time being, there is less of that because they are consumed by Ukraine. Fewer people and less equipment. But obviously, a country that is re-establishing the Leningrad military district is a country we have to watch out for.
I asked Prime Minister Støre if Norway saw the risk that any ceasefire in Ukraine could make Putin turn up the heat in the Arctic. And here is his reply.
Russia is now recreating its Leningrad military district. That affects the northeastern part of Russia, close to us. And when we are planning our defense posture towards 2030, it is with that in mind. You know, if this war ends, and it should end, what will be Russia's relations with its neighbors? I had my Polish colleague in my office 2 days ago, or the Polish foreign minister, discussing this. And what we see is that the Nordic Baltic countries, together with Poland and Germany, are in a much closer discussion on how we will collaborate and keep each other informed about these issues.
The Norwegian Prime Minister expressed alarm at Thursday's expiry of the landmark nuclear arms control treaty between Russia and the United States. He urged Washington and Moscow, as well as China, to return to negotiations. While Norway, Poland, and others on the eastern flank are concerned about Russia's tactical, short-range nuclear weapons, the Norwegian leader made a point that most ballistic intercontinental missiles were aimed at the United States. Speaking to 1,500 delegates, including U.S. officials, he recalled having to remind President Trump about this reality.
I heard President Trump in Davos 2 weeks ago, where he said something like this: "We have given everything to NATO. NATO has given nothing back to us." And I'm a diplomat, so I will say, Mr. President, that is wrong. I have a few other words in my head, but I think this is a sober way of saying it.
Despite keeping a cautious tone throughout his presentation here, the Norwegian premier said Norway would boost its military spending this year to 3.5% of GDP, roughly $16 billion. That highlights that the age of peaceful cooperation in the Arctic between Russia and the West is for now over. From Tromsø, Norway, I'm Adam Yasser.
Rustem Umerov, the Secretary of the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council and Kyiv's chief negotiator, has confirmed that the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia and the United States have begun in Abu Dhabi. The two-day talks are expected to follow a similar format to last month's negotiations, with officials from Washington, Kyiv, and Moscow in attendance.
Fire crews rescue residents trapped in their burning building. Russia, overnight Tuesday to Wednesday, continued its relentless campaign of airstrikes. Here in Ukraine's southern Odessa region, in the northeastern Sumy region, where scores were evacuated, and in the Zaporizhia region, where 3 people, including 2 18-year-olds, were killed and at least 20 others wounded. Ukraine's leading private energy company, DTEK, says Russia's early Tuesday attacks on the country's energy system were the largest so far this year. Vladimir Putin briefly suspended strikes on the energy infrastructure amid freezing conditions following a call with Donald Trump, but maintained deadly attacks on other targets.
We see that Russia responded to this request with a record use of ballistic weapons. Not even 4 days have passed from the week that Russia was asked to observe. This also says a lot about everything else Russia promises or may promise. If their word is not kept now, what can be expected later?
Zelensky's comments come as senior representatives from Ukraine, Russia and the US are set to meet again on Wednesday for further peace talks in Abu Dhabi. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas told TVP World that the bloc must put more pressure on Russia to move from pretending to negotiate to real talks.
I don't see really any signs from Russia to want peace. They are going for their maximalist demands, and that's why our response is clear. We need to put more pressure on Russia so that they would go from pretending to negotiate to actually negotiate.
A key obstacle in the talks remains Russia's demands to hand over land in the eastern Donbass region that it does not control. The territory in question is a strategic barrier that could hold up future Russian advances. Experts say there is little hope in Ukraine of a breakthrough in the negotiations.
Major survey company did public opinion polling in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian population overwhelmingly, like 70% of the population, has no expectation of any progress in the peace talks in 2026, and only a minority expect something productive to happen in 2027.
Moscow's refusal to make concessions is no surprise to this community in the Zaporizhia region, where they're being forced to flee their homes in the face of increasing Russian attacks.
Emmanuel Macron has said that work is underway to restart talks between Europe and Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. The French president thinks it's important for Europe to have its own communication channels with the Kremlin, but some European officials aren't convinced. Our correspondent Alex Cadier has been talking to some of those very officials. Good afternoon, Alex. So not everyone is convinced by President Macron reaching out to Vladimir Putin. What are they saying there?
Yeah, you're right, Don. Some skepticism about this idea. Now, let's hear from what Macron's position is initially. Clearly, as you said in your introduction, he thinks there is importance in having a separate track of communication, a European communication with Vladimir Putin, to see if perhaps there is another way, not a US-only led way, to reach peace in Ukraine. The attention from the French president is clearly either you are in the room making decisions, involved in the conversation, or not at all. So clearly, either at the table, on the menu, Emmanuel Macron wants to be speaking to Vladimir Putin. But officials I've been speaking to in Brussels the last few days, the last few weeks, have one very simple question for the French president. Why? What is the benefit of a European communication track with Vladimir Putin? As far as they're concerned, Putin, is getting everything he wants from the United States, the ability to continue his war. No particular sanctions directly on Russia from the United States. He attacked Kyiv in the last 24 hours and clearly can continue to do so. Donald Trump said he didn't violate the ceasefire. So European officials saying, what is the point? Europe cannot give Vladimir Putin anything that he wants to end this war, and therefore talking to him is futile. Nevertheless, there is another school of thought, of course. We heard from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, at the European Council meeting back in December about this very point.
I see that there are people who talk to Vladimir Putin, so I think that we, Europeans and Ukrainians, have an interest in finding the right framework to re-engage in this discussion in a proper manner. Otherwise, we're discussing it among ourselves with negotiators who then go off alone to discuss it with the Russians. That's not ideal.
So clearly, as I said, Don, you are either at the table or on the menu. That is the perspective from Emmanuel Macron. He wants to have diplomatic conversations. We understand the Kremlin has now confirmed that low-level talks are going on to see if a conversation between the two leaders is possible, or between Vladimir Putin and another European representative. Nevertheless, in Brussels, still some skepticism, asking very simply, what is the point of talking to Vladimir Putin? He has no intention to end this war. Don.
Right. Alex Cadier reporting there from Brussels. Thanks for keeping us up to speed on those latest issues with the French president. Thank you. Epstein conspired against me to make sure I lose the election, Donald Trump told reporters at the Oval Office on Tuesday, adding that the country should move on to other issues. Trump is mentioned more than 1,000 times in the latest batch of documents related to the Epstein case.
Epstein conspired. This just came out yesterday in the millions of pages of documents, how crazy this is, conspired against me in order to fight like hell to make sure I lose the election. That's the only thing that was mentioned about me. I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else, really. You know, now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else,
what would you say to people
like
who feel like they haven't gotten
healthcare,
justice, Mr. President?
something that people care about.
Poland will launch an investigation into possible links between the late U.S. sex offender and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein and Russian intelligence, as well as any impact on Poland, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has announced.
On Tuesday, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk told a government meeting that authorities would establish a team to investigate any potential fallout in Poland from Epstein's crimes, specifically in relation to what he said was possible involvement by Russian secret services.
A growing number of commentators and experts assume that it is highly probable that this pedophile scandal was a premeditated operation by the Russian KGB. This so-called honey trap, a sweet bait, a trap set for the elite of the Western world, primarily the United States.
The team will be led by the Polish Minister of Justice, Waldemar Żurek, and the team itself will consist of prosecutors, police, and the most professional officers from the services dealing with security issues and the analysis of such materials.
There's enough evidence in the public sphere to suggest that this is a matter being handled by Russian intelligence, which could directly threaten Polish security. So, for these two reasons, it's definitely a matter. Besides, of course, it's abhorrent, but for those two reasons, it's a matter that needs to be addressed systematically and at the Prime Minister's behest.
While no Warsaw official has been implicated in the newly released tranche of files so far, Polish names do show up.
Of course, some links shows that hands of Epstein got also Poland, especially Krakow, from other places.
The U.S. Justice Department recently released millions of internal documents about Jeffrey Epstein. These papers show that the late financier and convicted sex offender had connections to many well-known people in politics, business, finance, and education, both before and after he pleaded guilty to prostitution charges in 2008.
It's the end of an era in Czechia. On Wednesday, the last cart loaded with coal left the Czech coal mine in Stonava. The closure of the facility ends 250 years of the industry in the Czech Republic and leaves Poland as the sole coal producer in the European Union.
What you see is history. The last coal mine in Czech Republic has stopped production, ending 250 years of the coal industry in the country.
It is sad that it's ending because the work is good. I am not going to say otherwise. Hard work, but good work. I could work here for 5 more years. It is what it is.
The main reason for the shutdown is economics. The deeper you dig looking for coal, the more expensive it gets. And in Stonava, they've been mining very deep.
Global coal prices are low, while our costs to extract coal from ever greater depths, and I am talking here about depths of 8,000 meters and more, are becoming higher and higher.
Another reason is how power generation has changed in the Czech Republic since the beginning of the century. 25 years ago, around 3/4 of electricity was generated using coal. Now, this value has halved to around 1/3.
Demand for hard coal in the Czech Republic has dropped very sharply. Electricity generation in the country is no longer dependent on coal. Production of heat still partially is. However, the owners of thermal plants do not hide the fact that they are converting to gas and biomass in a very short time.
The closure of the Stonava mine means the Czech Republic is leaving the elite club of remaining coal producers in the EU. This club now has only one member: Poland. But even here, the winds of change are blowing strong. Similar to what happened in the Czech Republic, the share of coal in electricity generation has halved in the past 25 years. And it could drop to zero in an ambitious scenario envisioned in the country's newest energy strategy. According to a social pact between the government and mining unions, the last mine will be shut down more than 20 years from now, in 2049.
And that concludes Wednesday's Midday Report. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.